Hello guys, this is Yakov Fein from Farata Systems. We are continuing our training Introduction to Java Programming. Today is Unit 12, Lesson 12. All of the videos are located on YouTube and you can find slides as well. Today we are talking about working with relational databases using JDBC. I assume that most of you know SQL. If you don't, you have to go and study on your own. I will spend maybe 5 minutes total on SQL and relational databases, and then we switch to Java. Relational databases, R DBMS. R means that the table are related to each other. Like in this case, there is a table students, and by the way, table consists of rows and columns. So table students is related to table courses via the table take course. There are different relations between the tables, direct or indirect, but the basic blocks of the relational databases are tables. Tables consist of rows, this is a row, and columns. One row is one record. So in this case, we can say that we have 3 rows or 3 records on students. Each student has properties or attributes. Each attribute is a column. Student ID is a property, name, phone, date of birth, all these are columns or properties of the student in this case. Let's look at a couple of examples of SQL. SQL is structured query language, and it's used to work with the data. You can show me all students who take this particular course, or you can say update the grade on the students. Actually, we don't have a grade over here, right? No grade table. Update the phone. Maybe a person got a new phone on the table, and so on. So all these queries, we say, are done in SQL query. Structured query language. Sometimes people say SQL, sometimes people say SQL. Is both correct. Select star from students, star or asterisk, meaning show me all rows from table students. All rows and actually all columns. This asterisk means I don't want to say specifically which columns I'm interested in. Just show me all of them. So all 4. ID, name, phone, and date of birth will be included into a result set after the select statement. SQL is set-oriented language, meaning that you run a query and you get a set of records. Or maybe you get an empty set, right? If no records meet your criteria. How do you specify criteria? Criteria you specify in the where clause. Select phone. In this case, I want to find the phone, only the phone, not asterisk, the phone only from students, where name is equal Matt. So Matt's phone is 555-4141. Of course, if there's only one Matt in our table students, it's great. We'll find only one phone, and it's going to be the right Matt. But typically, we want to have something that is unique for every row. So this something that is unique is called primary key. So in this case, in our table, we decided that the primary key will be the ID. I decided it's a primary key. Something that is unique. So there is no other students with the ID equal 500. So ideally, if we knew that Matt's ID is 500, this query to find his phone would be more precise, more accurate, so to speak. Next, we can join tables together, students and take course. See, in the from clause, I'm specifying 2 tables, not just 1, but 2. Show me the name and class ID from both tables. But how do you join them? On which value? What do they have in common? In this design, what do they have in common? They have in common apparently this ID, right? This ID, the blue one. in here, in take course table and in student table. So in the where clause, we specify the join condition. How do we join them? Where join these tables by student ID, where students.id, table name, column name, is equal to takes course ID, and met equal name equal met. Not only I want to join the table, of course, but I want to see a subset of records for met, specifically for met. So in this case, only the first row will be taken from table students, and then the related row, which is, we have only one over here, this one, right? So we're gonna get met, we're gonna get met and 1001 as a class ID as a result of query number 3. Query number 4, select name title from students, take courses. In this case, we are joining 3 tables. We want to have something from table students and something from table courses. One student can take multiple courses. On the other hand, one course can be taken by multiple students, right? So we have a many-to-many relationship, so-called many-to-many. And to resolve this many-to-many, there is this table take course. Again, I'm not going to go deep into the SQL rules and regulations, so to speak. Read about it. Read about many-to-many relations in SQL to understand why these tables are structured this way. So we are joining them. So look at this. Where clause. I'm joining the first 2 tables as I did before in the example number 3. I'm joining students and take course by ID. And on the other hand, I want to join this table, take course, with courses. And take course class ID equal class ID. Courses class ID. So these 2 guys have also a common column, class ID, the red one. Right, so we can, in this example, it'll be printing name of the students and title of the course. So all, and they will be matching, properly matching to each other. So if met with ID 500 has taken the course with the class ID 1001, the title of this course is Intro to Informatic. So the first row in the result set will be met Intro to Informatic, right? If Jenny with ID 501 exists twice in here in table take courses with 501, see? She took 2 courses. Actually, the class ID was the same, data mining, but she took one data mining on fall of 2002 probably, and she failed miserably, I guess. And she had to take it again in spring of 2003, right? So 2 rows will be coming with Jenny. The title will be the same. We'll see Jenny data mining. And again, Jenny data mining. We won't see the difference. Why? Because we did not select semester. If I would have added semester over here after the title, comma, semester, then it would make sense. I would see that Jenny took it in fall of 2002 and in spring of 2003. And finally, to conclude our super brief tutorial on SQL, how to do aggregate functions, aggregates. I want to count the rows from the table take course. Count star. Show me all rows from table course where class ID is equal 102. Right? In this case, I'm going to get 2 as a result of the query number 5. 2. Just 2. If I wouldn't add the where clause, I would have gotten 4, right? So there's a whole bunch of aggregate functions, sum, max, average, and so on. So this concludes our SQL tutorial. And now let's talk about relational database management system, which are dominant in the development wherever you want to work with data. There is a group of tables that is called NoSQL. Group of database management system that is called NoSQL databases. But their portion in the real world of IT is tiny at this point. They don't use SQL, they don't store the data as tables and rows and everything. They store data as objects, in some cases key value pairs, more freedom, different. What about relational database management system? The popular ones, the big guys, are Oracle DBMS, DB2, Microsoft SQL Server. MySQL Server is a smaller but very popular open source DBMS. Sybase, Informix probably. Are they still around? I don't even know. Maybe. But we are going to use a little tiny database called JDBC, which is good for education, for studying, but the chances are very slim that you're going to be working with JDBC on a real-world application. But it takes SQL statement, so we can test our skills in SQL using something. And the good news is very easy to install, or actually even some of you may already have it installed. Next, Java. How Java works with the relational database management system. There are two packages that comes with Java JDK. Java SQL and Java XSQL. All the classes that you need are there. So we're going to be importing some statements, some classes from there. JDBC is an API. It's an abstraction that prescribes you how to work with a database from Java. Again, the relational database. There is a class called connection in that API. There is a class called statement, result set, and many other classes. What's the big deal? What's the big idea about JDBC? The big idea is that it's unified. No matter what database management system you want to use, you still will be using the class connection or statement or result set. Yes, every vendor of DBMS will provide their own drivers for Java. But regardless of how they implemented the drivers inside, you're going to be calling the same API. That's the beauty of JDBC. Same API. And the drivers will be coming in the form of a jar, Java archive. So if you want to work with Oracle, for example, you're going to be taking their jar file, adding it to your project in the class path, or if you work in Eclipse, you will do property of the project, Java build path. So you need to specify where is the driver that you need, where is that jar file. You will add it to the class path, and your Java program will see all these classes. Some Java developers who have problems with learning SQL, they say, can't we do everything in Java? And the response was, yes, you can. Of course you can, because there are so-called object relational mapping frameworks. They say you can easily create a class customer in Java and specify that this class customer actually represents a table in a database called customer. So this way they try to map a Java class to a flat two-dimensional table in a database. And they give you a special language that you can use in Java to work with the data. And it may or may not be the good idea, but it's there. We are not considering this ORM framework, but what we do, we work with pure JDBC. And by the way, under the hood, all these frameworks like Hibernate, which is popular, or Java EE has an API, a Java Persistence API, which is built on top of some implementation of this API. So their idea is map a table to a Java class. We don't like it. I don't like it. Maybe you do. Why you may like it? Why you may want to learn Hibernate? Because they will ask you these questions on the interview. Because your resume have to have it. In the year 2014, you need to have it on your resume. and during the technical interview, pretend that you like it. When you will become more senior and you will need to pretend less and less, then you can look at the framework called MyBetis. MyBetis allows you also to be more productive with SQL, but they don't force you to map a table to a Java class. They allow you to write SQL inside your Java program and automate the process of putting a result set into a Java class. There is also a code generator called Jook, J-O-O-Q, which also helps in working with SQL from Java. Look at it. Let's talk about the drivers, JDBC drivers. There are 4 types of JDBC drivers. Back in the 90s, when I was much younger, the ODBC was very popular way of connecting to Microsoft databases. On the desktop, we had that little database called Microsoft Access, and there were ODBC drivers for that installed on the PC, or Excel could work with them. Because of that popularity, creators of Java said, we need to create a bridge. Many people have it, so let's create a bridge. From Java through ODBC drivers, we can connect to Microsoft Access. I don't remember when Microsoft SQL Server was created, but Microsoft SQL Server also allowed to create through ODBC. So that's it. They created it, I looked at it, I taught many classes explaining this, that type 1 is JDBC ODBC bridge, and I forgot about it. I never in my life used these drivers. They require, again, ODBC drivers to be present on the client's machine, and I don't see a reason to use them at all, because there are other, nicer drivers, especially type 4. Type 2 driver. Type 2 driver is a mix of Java and native code, more native, I would say. Let's say written in C language, hardware specific, OS specific. So Java is a wrapper. So from your Java perspective, Java program, you still use Java, but internally there is a piece written in C. And these drivers have to be installed. For example, Oracle, big database, they have Oracle OCI drivers. Great Oracle OCI drivers, it's very good. But they have to be pre-installed. If this is a server situation, if you are running Java program on the server and many users hit this server, but Java program is one, and you are controlling this environment, it's in your data center, then you can install, of course, Oracle drivers, which is of type 2, and enjoy it. So Oracle or any other native drivers are in business, and you may run into them, of course, in production. Type 3 is a special deal that also assumes that you have some server. It consists of 2 parts. The client portion, generic to every database, which just relays the request to the server, and then the server part, which is specific to the database management system. Again, I'm not going to lie to you. Never in my life, in my how many years, more than 15 years probably of Java, never used type 3 JDBC drivers. What I do in the morning after brushing my teeth, I'm using type 4 drivers, and many people are using it. Why it's so good? Because it's thin. It doesn't require anything. It's written purely in Java, and you don't need to install anything or pre-install anything on the user's machine. So if you have your application, you can package it. You can just add one extra jar, and that's it. That's your drivers. Or even if you are using these outdated Java applets technologies, which when the Java code is downloaded and run in the Java runtime inside your browser, even there you can touch the jar with with type 4 drivers, and your applets can talk to a database without any installation on the user's machine. Pretty popular. Type 4 is our way to go, and at least today. Let's talk about the Java DB. Java DB comes with your JDK install, at least on Windows machine. It's also known as DB. DB is an open source database that happens to be packaged with Java JDK. If you are on Windows and if you run install like I showed you in lesson 1, most likely you already have it in there, in program files on JavaDB. Don't remember if you have it by default on Mac OS. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but it's regardless. Beside the point, you can get it easily from here. So go to this site, install it, download and install it from there. Installation is very simple. It's basically you are unzipping the archive and done. You got it. Also, starting from lesson 26 in the textbook, I am explaining how to use Glassfish application server. Glassfish is also packaged with DB. You want to kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Be my guest. Installed Glassfish, but the only thing is that in the book I was installing Glassfish 3, version 3. Now it's Glassfish 4. So install Glassfish 4 and you're going to get DB as a part of it as well. But in a clean or pure way, you can install it from this site. And you unzip it somewhere. In my case, I unzipped it in the folder Derby. This is what you're going to get. Bin is a directory with runnable programs, so you need to add this bin to your path on your computer. And there's one extra variable called Derby home that you need to set. What else? There is a lib directory. In that lib directory, you have a driver. Type for driver is right there. Derby client.jar. So if you want to write a client program in Java and connect to this server, Derby server, you're gonna have to take this Derby client and add it to your project. I'll show it to you in 10-15 minutes probably. Okay, how are you gonna configure it? I have this link on this slide and on the next as well, and we will try to do that as a part of this walkthrough number 1. So configuration instructions it's published in one of the universities. Oh, let me bring it here. And a pretty nice site. HTTP. Swinburne University. So they explaining how to install or configure Derby on different OS. So 2 things that you need to do, as I said, you need to set the Derby home variable to point at the folder where you unzipped your Derby install. In their case, it's on C drive, for example, in apps Derby. And you're going to have to set the path environment variable to point at the bin directory of your install of Derby, because we're going to be running scripts from there. So I'm running on Mac OS, so I will be using this syntax. Derby home is equal wherever I am. And where I am here, right? Users Wi-Fi in Derby. So let's go to this terminal window. I'm in here. Let me change it to Derby. This is what I got there, right? Let's see, do I have Derby in my path already? In my path variable. This is the syntax for macOS and for Windows as well. No, I don't. I don't have it here. So I need to add it to the path variable. Again, for my case, I need to... Actually, let me start with Derby home. I will create a variable that points at my Derby directory, and then I will change the path that points at that uses whatever value I put in the Derby home, and attach bin, and attach the rest of the directories that are on my machine. In Windows, you use semicolon as a separator, right, in the path, and on macOS or Linux, you use colon. Right. So Derby home is equal. This is going to be the value for Derby home. Derby home is equal this. Right? Let me do echo. Just to prove that it's done. Yes, it's correct. Now, path on my, I don't want to change it globally on my machine. It's going to be done only in this particular command window, terminal window in my case. Path is equal. I want to take whatever the value is in the Derby home, right? And I want to attach bin directory, and I don't want to forget about whatever I had before in the path variable. Echo path variable. See, now my path variable start with this. It knows where my Derby is. Let me do one more thing. I will create an extra terminal window. Why? Because I will need to. In one of them, I will start the server, the Derby server, and in the other, I'm going to be using a utility, IQ utility. IJ utility that will connect to the server. So let me do this. I'm creating a new terminal window. I'm setting the Derby home here, and I'm setting the path there as well. All right, so I have two terminal windows, or you can create two command windows if you are on Windows. Now, after I done that, I need to test, do I really have it? The sysinfo program is sitting inside the bin directory of your Derby install. So if I will just enter sysinfo, it responds. It tells me what do I have in terms of Derby install. See? It tells me that yes, I have it. This is the Derby information. This is a version and everything. So if you see this response, it means that at least you set the variables, the system variables properly. That's the first slide. First walkthrough start. Continuing. Now we need to start the Derby database server. To do that, there is a program start network server in your bin directory of your install. If you will open up the bin directory in your Derby, there is start network server. This is the Unix version or Mac OS, and this is the Windows version. So what we want to do in one of the command windows, we're gonna do start network server, and it's up and running. Look at this. It says that the server is running and it is listening. It's ready to accept connection on port 1527. I'm gonna leave it alone. Let it sit there and listen to port 1827. And I'm going to go to another command window. Let me clean the screen. So in this command window, we will start the interactive utility that comes with Derby. IJ. I need to start this utility, and from there I will create command to connect to a database called lesson 22. I've been trying two different versions of command for this utility. The last one worked for me. Some people used the first syntax. So what does it mean? It means connect to the server that is sitting on 1527 and connect to the database called lesson 22. And if it's not there yet, if you don't have such a database, create it for me. This create is equal true means create it for me. So what I will do now, I will take this command and I will give it to the IJ utility. IQ is something completely different, right? So let me start IJ. Started. So this is a prompt of IJ. Let me, it's because of these stupid apostrophes that are changing my presentation. All right, let me do it manually. Connect. JDBC and Derby, localhost, port 1527. Database name is lesson 22. Create is equal true. It cannot establish connection. Unable to establish connection. What do I do wrong? Let me see again. Let me see it. Connect JDBC Derby colon JDBC colon Derby colon. Do I do the same thing over here? JDBC colon Derby colon localhost 1527 lesson 22. Create true. As you can see, I made a stupid mistake. In the word connect, I misspelled connect. Alright. Connect JDBC Derby localhost 1527 lesson 22. The name is database. Create is equal true. What's wrong now? Lesson 22. Create true. Killed the IJ utility. Control C, restarted it, reissued the same exact command, and it works now. Going back to the slides. Walkthrough 1. End. So in here I show you some SQL to create the table employee, and then to insert some data into this table. The part of the command in SQL that creates objects inside the database is called DDL, data definition language. So create table is part of it. When we do something with the data, we say that we do manipulation with the data. So DML is usually referred to the command that do something with the data. Insert, update, delete, select. So insert into the table 3 employees. In my database, I already have the table employee. I should have it at least, and I have already 3 data inserted, 3 rows inserted. If so, I will try to issue this command, select star from employee. In your case, you would need to run this command, create, and this command, insert, inside the IJ. Let me do this. Create asterisk from and it doesn't like something. And select star from employee. Yeah, I got it. So I got 3 rows, right? John Smith, Joe Allen, and Mary Lou. These are the IDs, employee numbers. See the title of the column is here, and the job titles are there. So we have a table in a database lesson 22 with 3 rows. All right. Next, let's go back to some theory. Driver manager. Driver manager is a Java class that was available from day 1 in JDBC packages. It's not the best way to connect in production, but it's a fine way if you are running a standalone Java program. Driver managers have to be loaded. In many cases now it's an optional step. The for name is a method in the class with the name class that can load any class in memory. So in the past you had to know, first of all, you had to know what is the main class in that jar with drivers, and then you would need to load it using for name. As far as I know, in most cases you don't need to do this for name. In Derby definitely you don't need to do this. In Oracle you don't need to do this. I don't know about the other databases. So what you start from this line in your program. in your driver, you say to the class driver manager. Again, I assume that you have your jar with the drivers in your class path for your program. You're saying driver manager dot give me a connection, get connection from this URL. What is a URL? It's specific to every database. You have to read the manual, and in case of Derby, it's this. JDBC Derby lesson 22. In Derby, they store a database in a folder right inside the Derby. Lesson 22. I have this folder on my computer, and you can specify user ID and password when you are trying to get a connection. In our case, it's a demo database, so we don't need to specify user ID or the password. In the real databases, you would need to specify. Next, then you say to Java, please create a statement object for me. As a matter of fact, statement object in JDBC is not the only one to work. There is a different way. One of them is called prepared statement, and the other one is callable statement. I'll explain what they are in 5 minutes. But you're saying, create for me an instance of Java object statement. It's step number 3. Then you will say to the statement, dear statement, I assume that you have a variable that points at this object in memory. Execute a query for me, please, SQL query, and you pass a string which contains the SQL statement. It could be select, it could be maybe update, insert, delete into a database. If it was a select, then you expect a result set back. And what you need to do, you need to loop through this result set using the method next. So you're saying, until you have a next row, give it to me. And then inside the loop, inside the while loop, inside the curly braces, you will be extracting values that represent every column. Of course, you need to know what is the data type of the column. So if you know that employee number is a numeric integer, then you will be using the method getInt from JDBC, from the class result set. Or if you know that this column is varchar, which is for strings, then you will be using getString. So you need to read documentation for a particular database that you will be using that shows you the mapping between this database data types and Java data types. And when you're done processing the result set, you close the resources like result set, statement, connection. And here's an example of this class, which we will open up in a minute in Eclipse. So if you will import lesson 22, then what will happen? You will see this code in there in your Eclipse install. As a matter of fact, let me go to Eclipse and I will show you this code over there. I already imported this lesson. And by the way, when you will import this lesson, you will see this. You will see a fat exclamation point over here in red, saying that there is a mistake or an error or something. Why? When I was uploading the examples to the publisher's site, it has a link. This project has a link that was specifying where my jars for Derby are. Let me go to properties. So what you need to do, you need to go to property of this project. When you see this fat red exclamation point, you need to go to Java build path, and in there you will see a link to Derby client.jar, which will be pointing at some directory, whatever I was using back then, 3 years ago. And of course, you have your Derby installed in completely different place, so your jar is located in the lib directory under your Derby installation. So what you need to do, you will need to click on that jar that you will see after import. You need to remove it, and then you need to click the button Add External Jars and add the one from the location that you have on your machine. This is how to fix that problem that you will see. Employee list Java, that's the one that you saw on the slide. Let's see. What do we do? Class employee list, you declare variables for connection statement result set variables. Over here I say that loading the driver using for name is optional. Then you are saying to this driver manager, line 20, get connection for me. So now if everything is fine, the connection con variable will have the reference to the connection object. This is SQL that we want to execute. We keep it in a string. Then you say on line 26 to the connection object, please create a statement for me, statement object. Then you say statement, execute query for me. Which one? This one. Select star from employee. Hopefully we're going to get back the records from the database. I expect 3 rows that we just inserted using ij utility. And then for every row that came from a database, I'm iterating through every row, and for every row I am saying give me the integer from the result set, right, and put it in my variable. It's an employee number. I know it's an int. Get string. Why? Because I know that employee name ename column is of type varchar, so it means string. Or give me a job title. Get string again. And what I do, I just concatenate all these together and I print them on the screen. The very first piece over here is an empty string, just to convert automatically the emp number from integer to a string. That's it. And by the way, we are catching an exception, SQL exception. SQL exception is a specific exception that is given to you for catching SQL errors. SQL errors are specific to the database, of course, and typically you get the message, the text of the error, and there is so-called error code. Every database has their code system for every error that may happen. So you want to know what it is, then you can refer to the documentation for the database and see what exactly this message means to get the extended explanation of the error. So get error code is something that you will be doing. This example was written before Java 7, that's why I do this ugly closing, no close with resources at that point yet. Now let's run it. Right click, run it. And I got it. In the past, I was running into another problem. I was running this example and all of a sudden my connection was refused. And why was it? Because in the past they would allow only one connection to the database. I already had it using the utility ij, and then I was trying to run my Java program and it was telling me you can't connect anymore. So what helped me in the past, I was closing this ij utility, Control C over here, and then my Java program will be running fine. But now it seems to be that they changed it and I can run it from both places. But if you will run into this situation in your version of JDBC, then know that apparently you run into the one connection only restriction. So we did it. That I think it was it? Let me see. Yeah, it was walkthrough number 2, by the way. We just finished. But let me go back and review some more slides. Data source. Data source class is a preferred way to do JDBC. Data source is like a wrapper for the driver manager. The big idea is that typically your Java program will be running on a server side. Many users will hit that Java program. And of course, the easiest way to do would be to, for every request, for every user request, connect, create an instance of connection object, do your job, and then disconnect. But connect, disconnect is a slow operations. And so we want to minimize connecting, disconnecting. We want to reuse connection for multiple queries. That's one thing. So The other thing is that we want to control how many threads are created. Or maybe, again, typically on the server side, you would be creating, for every user request, you would be creating a new thread, and in that thread, you would be dealing with a database. So we want to control, we want to create a pool of connections, and every thread that will be running for making the user happy will be getting a connection from the connection pool. And the good part is that driver, the data source API, allows you to configure the connection pool without the need to program it manually. I remember like 15 years ago, it wasn't there. Data source API wasn't there, and we had to do it on our own. We had to write a program that write a manual object pool, and on the program start, we would create, say, 10 connections to the database. We would put them in a collection in our class, which is a connection pool that we created, and then we would mark every connection as we give it to somebody. When somebody else would return it, we would mark it as like a flag that is free or it's busy. So we had to create all this manual. Not anymore. Maybe 10 years ago, they introduced this data source API, and everybody's using this. So if you are going to use Java, especially on the server, most likely going to be using data source API. And you need to configure it for a particular database. You need to read documentation over there and see how to configure it. Where is this data source object sitting if you are running in one of the Java application server? There is something called JDBC. We haven't learned it yet, but you can if you will read lesson 31 from the textbook. So a typical situation, the application server that you use, whatever you use, Glassfish, JBoss, WebSphere, when you start it, you have a configuration file in XML, for example, that specifies how many connections, how to configure your data source with connection pool. The server starts, and it publishes this information in so-called Java naming and JDBC tree, let me put it this way. It's somewhat similar to what we've learned as an RMI register. Remember, a place where different objects could be bound, registered. So JDBC tree will get this data source configuration, and it'll bind there the connection pool over there. And then your Java program that will run in the same application server will just go and grab the connection from JDBC. How? Two ways. Either do a lookup in JDBC or dependency injection with an annotation resource, which you don't know about all these. We probably will talk about them a bit later in the course. You can use it on the client as well, technically. And if you want to see a sample how to connect to DerbyDB server, if you have a server, right? You want to connect it from the client, but using data source API, I gave you a link so you can follow and read it. On this slide, I show you an example from JBoss application server. They call it Wildfly these days. Open source JBoss. Wildfly, right? So in their configuration, in this example, on this slide, they have two data sources configured. This is the one between data source and /data source, and then the other. And please take a look over here in green. You see the size of the connection pool. You're saying, I want you to create 10 of these. When use will start, when JBoss server will start, I want you to create 10 a pool for connections with 10 objects. That's the minimum size, and it can grow up to 20 connections, not more. The reason they decided that they don't want to allow more than 20 concurrent connection to the database, or maybe they purchase a license that restricts them from how many concurrent connections you can have with your DBMS. In any case, you need to read documentation for your specific server to see how to configure the data source over there. When you are done, it's very easy. Every Java program will start using the connection from the pool. Walkthrough we just did. Prepared statement. Prepared statement is something different comparing to statement. And let's imagine a situation when you have to run some query from your Java program, but not like we did before, select star from employee. The query that doesn't change, but we want to build a string by concatenating something to the string. Say we have a collection of employee numbers, and for every employee we want to get the information about the employee and maybe do something with it. Print it, or maybe process it, or maybe send it to somebody. A subset of employees. So one way to do that, and look at the bottom of the slide. If you would be using a statement object like we did in our walkthrough number 2, what you could have done? You could have written a program like this. You have a collection or array of employees, and you would be getting of employee numbers, right? You would be getting each number over here, and you would be connecting this number to the where clause. If you would do something like this in this syntax, this connection would need to this SQL would be compiled every time in a loop. Every time you connect. That's my puppy. He wants to play. Come over here, Sammy. Let me show you. He brought me a toy. That's Sammy, right? He's 7.5 months old. Sammy, I am teaching a Java class. Do you know that? No time to play. Sorry. That was Sammy. Sorry for interruption. Maybe actually this is going to help you to understand what I'm trying to say. So, in this case, the SQL would be recompiled. This string would be recompiled every time for every employee number. We don't like it. What we want to do instead, we want to compile the statement once, and it can be done using so-called prepared statement. See this? We are not using statement, we are using prepared statement. And the syntax states you write the SQL, and wherever you need to insert a parameter, you put a question mark. See this red one? So when you create a prepared statement, this statement will be compiled once. And then in a loop, you run through the array of employee numbers, and you pass parameters from that array. This one over here means the first parameter. I could have several parameters that should be passed to the where clause, right? In my case, I have only one. So every element from the array employees would be passed as a parameter and would replace this question mark. And in this case, there wouldn't be compilation of SQL every time. It would be compiled only once. So using prepared statement is preferable way of dealing with JDBC. You can say, what if I don't have parameters? Should I use statement, or I should still use prepared statement? My recommendation is use prepared statement. The thing is that in many cases, you will be, especially for the web application, you would be having a client, which is some HTML, JavaScript running in the browser, and the server. On the server, you are running a Java program that's supposed to query the database. The mistake that some people do, in the JavaScript on the front end, they prepare SQL statement and they send it over to the server. And there are bad guys who could do something that is known as SQL injection. They can intercept that SQL query that is going over the network and replace it with another one, which can harm your database. So passing the SQL over the wire is a bad idea in general. So if you think of preparing the SQL statement like this, right on the front end, and send it over to the JavaScript, it's a bad idea. So what's the better idea? The better idea is to have this statement on the server side in Java, right? And from the client, pass only parameters that the server side will use the way it is, the way it has to. This way would eliminate the possibility of SQL injection. Okay. Transactional update. What is that? Transactional update. In some cases, you want to execute more than one action as a one operation, as a one unit of work. Actually, it's a good definition that I like. Transaction is a single unit of work. If you have several steps, but you want to treat them as one, and either all of them succeed or undo everything, then we can say that we deal with transactions. So how you can do transactional work with SQL? Well, let me give you one example. For example, you are transferring money from checking account in the bank to your saving account. You want to transfer $500. What do you need to do? In this case, you need to issue two update statements, right? One update statement would need to update table checking account, set amount equal amount minus 500. The second SQL statement would be update saving account, set amount equal amount plus 500. So we have two statements that should be executed in a row. Let's say the first statement executed successfully. So a checking account has 500 less in the amount field. But the second statement that was supposed to add 500 to the saving account failed. Are you happy? And some people say, at least the first SQL statement went fine. No, you lost $500. So what you want to say is, these two update statements, treat them as one transaction. Either both of them are successful or undo, roll back whatever you managed to do as a part of this transaction. Roll back the whole thing. In this example, I show you a different example, and there is something that is called auto commit. Auto commit. When auto commit is true, it's a notion for most of the DBMSs. It means that as soon as you issue an SQL statement, it gets applied to the database. When auto commit is false, it means that until you specifically or explicitly invoke the command commit, changes are not considered to be final and are not applied to the database. So in this case, check this out. I set the auto commit equal to false, stating don't try to commit the changes until I will tell you to do so. Then you create a statement, and then you use add batch. You add statements, SQL statements, to the batch, and then you want to execute it as a batch. In this example, say I want to have a table orders, and I have a table order detail. Orders, something about order is stored in the table orders, and something is stored in table order details. So if you place a new order, we want to insert two rows, one in the table orders and the other in the table order detail. And we want both of them to succeed. If the second insert fails, I don't want to create a situation when my database is in inconsistent state. I want to roll back, undo stuff. See, so I added a couple statements to the batch, and I say execute batch. Execute them as one transaction. If everything was fine, I will reach this line, and I will issue a commit. If something went wrong, regardless the first one or the second one, I will jump over this commit and go to exception, and I will issue a rollback. I will undo the entire transaction. So the ability to support transactional data manipulation is very important, very important. And that's why in some cases, when people go to NoSQL databases, they are missing these features. Not in some cases, those features are not supported. And finally, we are approaching the end of the lesson. Design patterns that I want you to know about related to the database processing. When you create an application, you cut it into tiers, right? For example, you have a UI, GUI. So you create a bunch of classes that deals with GUI only. No business logic over there, right? Somewhere you will have classes which have business logic. I don't remember. I probably already mentioned somewhere before something called MVC, Model View Controller. It's another design pattern. Model is a place for data, view is a place for UI, and controller is in between, something that triggers updates on the screen, or maybe something that triggers updates of the data. So we are cutting our applications into tiers. And DAO stands for Data Access Object. When you will be programming, don't create a mess by adding this SQL related code and JDBC code everywhere in your program. Create a class and call it a DAO. For example, if you work with employees, create employee DAO. Name it this way. Or employee DAO service, something like this. And in there, put all the methods that are required for selecting data about the employee, or maybe updating, inserting data about the employee. So everything is in one place. And class like this is called, among programmers, it's called Data Access Object. Data Access Object. Also, when you are using Data Access Object, you need to pass some data to it, or maybe you need to get some data from it. How this is done? And this is done using another design pattern. So the data itself that you are passing to or from the Data Access Object, in the past they used to call them value object. You just create a class that represents an entity that you deal with. For example, an employee. You create a class. In there, you specify fields that represent this employee: last name, first name, address, phone number, and that's it. No business logic there. In some cases, people, what they do, they declare these variables as private, and they provide getters and setters, public methods, to change the value. But the point is, if you want to select an employee, you would create a Java class employee and populate these fields, and then DAO would return it to whoever invokes the method on the DAO, like select employee where ID is 123. Or DAO could return you a collection of value objects, a list of value objects, right? List of instances. So value object is also a design pattern, and eventually, it was originally named value object, but then I noticed that people renamed it, design pattern, into data transfer object. Maybe it happened because we are working in distributed world, so different applications talk to each other running on different servers. So server-side program has a data access object. It creates a list of DTOs, and it's sent over to the front end, and maybe JavaScript picks them up, and so on. And so on. We have a really nice training called Modern Web Development for Java Programmers. And in there we build an application and we explain all these tiers. But again, it assumes that you are already a Java programmer, which you are about to become. So, but still, programmers still use these words, value objects. If I will say to somebody, I'm going to give you a value object, they will understand what I mean. Or I can say, I will give you a DTO. They will understand what I mean. Read about them, and I provided a link at the end in the reading section to the article that explained it. So we are done. Technically, do the homework if you want. If you don't want, just enjoy your day. Lesson 22, whatever is in the try it section, do it over there. Study SQL, guys. Follow this link and read it. Get familiar with how you can automate or make it simpler working from Eclipse with Derby. As to reading a bunch of useful articles, and what I want to recommend this guy. I know him personally. This guy spent his life dealing with SQL. He published tons of books, simple one, not simple one. This one, SQL for Smarties, is advanced SQL, really cool stuff. But get a book by Joe Selko, maybe introductory one, and learn SQL. And that the last link is the link to the article at DZone, explaining what is DAO and what is a DTO. To challenge yourself, I recommend you to install a more or less realistic database. Not Derby like we did today, but something better. For example, I would recommend you to use Oracle. Oracle 11g Express is a free database. As a matter of fact, even the standard is free if the Oracle 11 standard, or even Oracle 12. If you use it only for development. Install it, and it has a nice utility called SQL Developer. to queries database. These days, IDEs also allow you to work as a client utility with UI, working with a database. Eclipse has it, IntelliJ IDE has it. So try to do the same thing that we did today, but against Oracle or MySQL or MySQL Server from Microsoft. So play with it. With that, I want to say thank you for watching this video. It was Yakov Fein with Farata Systems, and it was video number 12. 6 more to go. Thank you very much. See you next time.